Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to join us for the forum on fact-checking in Asia. We are very honored to cooperate with the Taiwan Fact-Check Center, the host of this forum. Today is the first day of this forum. The first section of this topic is politics and fact-checking. And for today's section, we have 18 graduate students participate in this meeting by the Graduate Institute of Journalism, National Taiwan University. We are very happy to be here. And I think most of you are ready for joining this very valuable meeting and discussion. Before we start our forum today, let me introduce our three honored speakers. First is Professor Masato Kajimoto. He is an associate professor of practice at the Journalism and Media Studies Center, the University of Hong Kong. Masato specializes in news literacy education and misinformation ecosystem research in Asia. In year 2019, he founded ANI, Asia Network of News and Information Educators, to develop teaching and learning materials specific to the region with other like-minded experts in the field. He also runs the student-driven fact-checking newsroom called ANI Lab at the university. We are very happy to have Professor Masato Kajimoto with us. And our second speaker is Gemma Mendoza. She is head for digital strategy at Rappler. Rappler is very well known. We congratulated on this organization for receiving the Nobel Peace Award. In this capacity, Gemma leads Rappler's research and related initiatives that focus on disinformation in the digital space. She co-authored The Enemy Within, a book on military corruption and civilian neglect, published by Newsbreak, the investigative reporting group, which became part of Rappler in year 2011. Her stories on governments and corruption, the security sector, disaster, and other social issues have won recognitions from various award-giving bodies. And finally, our third speaker, Ayushjav, is founder of the non-governmental organization Faro Foundation, Mongolia, which is backed by Faro Education Center, one of the largest language training school networks in Mongolia, co-founded by her more than 4 years ago. Benja is also a strong advocate for public education on digital literacy in Mongolia. So she founded the Faro Foundation Mongolia to raise social awareness and run training programs to raise public awareness of digital literacy in Mongolia. Faro has been the designated NGO partner of Facebook in Mongolia since year 2018. And Benja is also the representative consultant for Facebook on public policy work in Mongolia. She also sits on the board of directors of Mongolian Fact-Checking Center. So here are three of our honorable speakers for today's forum. And then let me introduce one very important supporters and practitioners of fact-checking in Taiwan. That's from Taiwan Fact-Check Center, 陈慧敏总编审。Let's welcome 陈慧敏。
Hi everyone, this is Summer Chen. I am the chief editor of Taiwan Fact Check Center, and we are so glad to be here, and we are glad to host this forum. And it's the second year for Taiwan Fact Check Center to host the forum of fact checking in Asia. And it was a pity that we didn't make it last year because of the pandemic. But fortunately, we host this forum this year, and it's our honor to bring all of you together to learn the insights and listen to the keynote speakers sharing. So glad we are bring all of you together today.
So yeah, I think everyone is ready. So let's welcome our first speaker, Professor Masato. Professor Masato, can you say hello to our audience?
Hello everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. It's
Hi.
very nice to be here virtually. Yeah, I wish I could be in Taiwan, but what can you do? Hi, my name is Masato Kajimoto. I'm an associate professor of practice at the University of Hong Kong. Thank you for inviting me to this conference today. In my presentation, I'd like to share some of my thoughts and observation about the relationship between politics and fact-checking, especially in Asian countries. My presentation today is based on this research I have done last year to map the landscape of fact-checking industry in Asia. According to Duke Reporters Lab, which has been monitoring the development of fact-checking industry all over the world, there are currently 94 active fact-checking organizations in the Asia-Pacific region. The number was 39 in the previous year. So just in 2 years, the number of fact-checking initiatives have more than doubled. And this number 94 does not include new initiatives that I know of. So there are many initiatives that have launched in 2020 which were not included in this survey by Duke Reporters Lab yet. Also, this survey does not include, and this is really important in our part of the world, governmentally led or governmentally affiliated fact-checking efforts. So, including all those projects and initiatives and governmental agencies, there are more than 110 active fact-checking efforts currently ongoing in our region. Now, out of 110, as far as I know, 35 organizations are certified by International Fact-Checking Network. They are the signatory organizations of the Code of Principles. So for my research, I have sent more than 50 invitations to different fact-checking organizations in the Asia region last year in October, and I have heard back from 40 out of 50. My main topic today for the rest of the presentation is politics and fact-checking. In particular, I want to focus on government. Probably many of you already know what IFCN is, but just in case, for those of you who do not know what IFCN is, it's an organization called International Fact-Checking Network at Poynter Institute. They have this certification program based on the standards that they think every fact-checking organization must adhere to. It's called Code of Principles. There are 5 main principles, and we don't have time to go through all of them, but I think principle number 1 and 3 are relevant to today's topic. So principle number 1 says, if you want to be a certified fact-checking organization, you have to display or show a commitment to non-partisanship and fairness. Number 3 indicates that you have to demonstrate a commitment to transparency of funding and your organization. Why are these two particularly relevant to today's topic of fact-checking and politics, especially government? Because in Asia, these are the conditions that can be very difficult to meet. In Thailand, for example, there's this TV show. It's actually a section of a TV news program that has been fact-checking social media rumors, questionable videos and photos for many years. It's called Show and Share in English, but the TV station or broadcaster is essentially governmentally owned. So right off the bat, their fact-checking effort does not really meet the criteria set by IFCN. And so it's really difficult to think about this. Yes, in a truly democratic society, news organizations, fact-checking organizations must be independent. But what if the entire news organization is owned by the state? Is it no longer good fact-checking? It's something to think about. And Thailand is not an exception. This is a national newspaper, I think very popular one in Vietnam. They also have been running fact-checking news articles for quite a number of years. But again, they are not entitled to even apply for IFCN certification. For the reason being, it's governmentally owned. In Malaysia, there's a new fact-checking initiative called MyCheck. They started last year. And this one is run by state-owned news agency. I have communicated with one of the editors working for MyCheck, and it seems like they do have slightly more editorial independence compared with some other similar types of organizations, but still, there are big limitations, right? So if you look at these three countries, these are oftentimes legitimate fact-checking efforts. But on the other hand, it's really hard for them to verify any political claims, especially when it comes to government. They would be quite hesitant in my view. And in fact, when I talked to some of them, they did say there are certain off-limit topics for them. And oftentimes those off-limit topics are politics, and especially the government in power. Oppositions maybe, but not the current government for obvious reasons. Now, these are at least news organizations. Yes, if you look at the ownership, they might be owned or affiliated with government, but they are an independent unit. Whereas in Asia, it's also common that the government themselves run fact-checking projects. So this is a new one, but in Vietnam, they started their own fact-checking website. From day one, they became the biggest fact-checking effort in the country. As you can imagine, government can spend lots of resources, money, human resources, they have it. Thailand also has governmentally run fact-checking organization now. In Malaysia, this is I think they started in 2017. Again, government runs fact-checking unit, and they have this website. In India, I think this was late 2019. They started fact-checking on their own. So their Press Information Bureau has now a unit that's been constantly monitoring social media and fact-checking potentially problematic content. And also in Singapore, I think this one is probably the oldest in Asia. They started in 2012. If you know anything about journalism, you would be concerned about this trend, because when the government decides what is true and what is not, it can be very problematic. Now, having said that, more than a few fact-checkers that I talked to said that governmental involvement, meaning governments doing their own fact-checking and disseminating their results or conclusions to the public, governmental involvement could be beneficial, especially when it comes to things like public health and natural disaster, aftermath of natural disaster, actually. And keep in mind that I did this interview in 2020 when everyone was worried most about misinformation surrounding COVID-19 pandemic. So obviously many fact checkers saw value in governmental involvement or governmental initiatives. Some of them said authorities have unmatched reach and resources to spend on this. And another fact checker said, we have to work with authorities anyway because their countries are not fully democratic. One way or another, they have to find ways to compromise. So if that's the case, might as well welcome them when it comes to fact-checking public health information or information about disasters and big accidents. Of course, there are other views that I heard from different journalists. One reporter from Thailand told me that nobody believes governmental fact-checking efforts. Well, she said she doesn't believe it. She doesn't care what they say. And she thinks many people wouldn't really pay that much attention, even though it's a big fact-checking operation in the country. Another person said governmental project is like facepalm. It's misusing fact-checking. So he is obviously against this governmental move. Another person said it's a political appropriation of fact-checking journalism. And another person also said the same thing. That's just another propaganda effort by the government. So definitely there are mixed views on government doing fact-checking. And I just want to recap because, again, I think when it comes to politics and fact-checking, government's involvement is important or inevitable in Asia. Right? So if governmental initiative is often politically one-sided, many political topics can be off-limit, or they intentionally spin maybe. That could happen. So it could be often politically one-sided. And governments have often direct involvement in news events or social issues. So there's conflict of interest right there in many areas. It could be seen as intimidation or infringement of free speech. Again, governments deciding what is fact or what is true, what is not, can be problematic and could be prone to abuse of power, because once you are deemed disseminating false information, then what? The next step is whether or not producing or disseminating misinformation are deemed criminal offense or not. And again, it's a bit hard to generalize, but in many Asian countries now, so-called fake news can be a criminal offense. So there will be a power that government can abuse if they're fact-checking and then later influencing the judicial system, which happens quite often in many Asian countries. And this worry is not just in like authoritarian countries. In general, if government's involved, people are worried about politicians weaponizing or misusing journalism and fact-checking. With that said, there are positive views as well. I already mentioned this. Government has unmatched reach, resources, and influence. They have an ability to mobilize other stakeholders very quickly. And this is very important, I think. For many independent fact-checkers, let's say fact-checking misinformation about COVID-19, it stops there. Your job is to write a story or create a video in order to give accurate information to the public. But you don't know if that story is reaching mass audience. Whereas government has the power to tell all the medical workers to tell their patients, or tell all the schools to distribute brochures, pamphlets, leaflets, whatnot. So mobilizing people based on fact-checking can be done by the government, but it's almost always impossible by commercial or small fact-checking organizations. Some journalists told me that she thinks there is some media literacy value, because even if people are skeptical about government's motivation behind fact-checking, they will pause and think. And if they develop that kind of attitude, they will apply the same attitude to everything, not just governmental fact-checking. So she told me that she thinks it might benefit the development of media literacy education, because naturally many news consumers would think twice before they believe what they're reading. But not all countries in Asia are authoritarian. There are more democratically oriented or mature democracy in our part of the world as well. In Indonesia, for example, government doesn't run their fact-checking organizations on its own. They used to have a website that had fact-checking. They're working with many different NGOs, and that website seems to have changed its nature. But this is another example where fact-checking organizations are working with a governmental ministry to develop anti-hoax chatbot, they call it in English. In China, well, China is a completely different system. It's not democratic. But government has this website to curate, well, aggregate and curate news stories from different organizations that are related to internet rumors and some of the problematic misinformation. Of course, you know, political topics, you can't really rely on these kind of services. But when it comes to public health misinformation, maybe it's still something worth paying attention, and the government runs that. And in Taiwan, and I think many of you are quite familiar, more than I do, I'm sure, how things work, right? And there are lots of fact-checking organizations in your place, and the government is one way or another trying to support your effort. I'm not just talking about here direct communication or direct support system between fact-checking organizations and government. Sometimes it's a public display of telling the world that the government is behind fact-checkers.
More importantly, Taiwan's vibrant civil society and civic tech community contributed tremendously in the effort to combat disinformation while safeguarding our democratic values of free speech and expression. Organizations such as the Taiwan Fact Check Center, CoFacts, Gulf Zero, MyGoPan, Doublethink Lab, and Information Operation Research Groups are just a few examples. They published thoroughly researched and detailed reports on checked facts.
I think there are pros and cons. Of course, this model is closer to traditional relationship between news media and government. In mature democratic societies, government should understand the roles of the fourth estate and why they need to be monitored by news organizations. If they understand that, then this relationship is healthy, because it is possible to maintain editorial independence even if you get support by the government. In this model, fact-checking organizations can also fact-check governments. All the political claims can be verified or investigated by journalists without worrying about safety or fearing losing jobs and other things. And impact could be big. So things could move quickly. I already talked about how governmental initiative has the upper hand when it comes to emergency situations because they can mobilize other units. Now, if you are just working with the government, maybe your influence is not that straightforward, but if there's a communication channel, then definitely it's better than having nothing. between news organizations and government in that kind of situation. Having said that, that kind of collaboration, it possibly undermines non-partisanship and journalistic integrity, especially from the audience's point of view. Not everybody supports the ruling party or the government. There are many people in any given society who support the oppositions. If fact-checkers are always mentioned by politicians from ruling parties or the government, the supporters of the opposing political parties would probably feel that these fact-checkers are not trustworthy because they seem to be politically inclined towards one side. And I don't think that's the situation where any fact-checker wants to be in. And that's the reason why non-partisanship comes in principle number one when you get certification from IFCN. But having said that, if you have a government who's like publicly supporting you all the time, this can be difficult. It could further divide and further polarize the public for this reason. Whatever political claim you fact check, people might second guess your motives. Again, if you work with the government, and that's a concern, a serious concern that the news organization should have. It's great that political leaders recognize your contribution to democratic society, but at the same time, if she says that in her speech, I think journalists should feel a bit uneasy about that. Our role is to monitor the government. If they say something questionable, we are the one we should fact check their statement. We are all humans. So if you have that kind of relationship, it's kind of difficult to do that. And that's, a concern, I guess. What if the government changes? In a democratic system, government could change every 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. Then what? So here's another scenario where working with government could backfire in the future if you are not careful as fact-checking organization. Thank you so much for watching my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. And also, if you'd like to get in touch with me, please feel free to email me, and I'm sure the organizer can share my email address later.
Thank you, Professor Masato Kajimoto. For those who join our meeting room late this afternoon, Masato Kajimoto is an associate professor of practice at the Journalism and Media Studies Center, the University of Hong Kong. And his research and report has been published on Live. You are interested, you can check the link we just posted on our chatting room. For those who want to raise questions, you can write in our chatting room, and we will have our QA section started about 3 o'clock this afternoon. And Professor Masato just gave us a very good and whole picture of fact-check efforts in Asia countries. And from his presentation, we can get an idea about the cooperation and the relationship between fact-check center, fact-check organizations, and their government in their certain countries. Of course, there are some benefits for this kind of support by the government. For example, on the issues of public health or natural disasters. But there are more dangers for this kind of cooperation. So Professor Masato just warned us that might cause the influence such as politically one-sided and conflict of interests. And there might be dangers of abuse of power by the government or infringement of free speech. So I believe there are something worth of us to think about for fact-checking efforts in Taiwan. Now I will move to our second speaker. Let's welcome Gemma from Philippines.
Hello, I'm Gemma Mendoza, Head for Digital Strategy at Rappler, and I'm here to talk about Rappler's story. So, first and foremost, Rappler started in 2011 as Facebook page Move.ph and launched its website in January 2012. So right now, actually by January this year, we're turning 10. And we have three pillars: journalism, technology and data, and community. And when we were launched, the reason really why we were launched was there were really our founders, which includes Maria Ressa, who has recently been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Some among the questions that our founders were asking then, back in 2011, when we were still conceptualizing Rappler, were these questions: at the time, the Philippines. Social media in the Philippines was already becoming more mainstream, and therefore that was prompting many newsrooms to adopt social media. And you have this sense of social media being a participatory space, and because of that, clearly there was going to be some change in the way journalism will be conducted. It will be practiced in this space where you have citizens participating. So one of among the things that we were asking them was, how then can you use the participation of citizens for larger positive goals, and how do you use that for making the journalism, the investigations, the in-depth reporting that journalists do have positive impact and help strengthen democracy? So those are some of the questions that we had in mind. The other thing that was really foremost was independent journalism is very difficult to sustain and very difficult to scale. But with social media, with technology, the thinking then was it was going to shift. It was ready. Things were at the point where there could be a big shift in the way independent journalism can be done. Journalism can be in the way journalists do their work, in the way we make sure that the work that we do achieves scale. So at our core, as we mentioned, is independent journalism and investigative reporting. So one of the key sections of news Rappler is Newsbreak. It came from an award previously an award-winning news organization, Newsbreak, which I also came from, and which was founded in 2001, and it's now part of Rappler. And we've done, as part of Rappler, we've done quite a lot of investigations, more recently on the drug war, and we've also been in the more recently released Pandora Papers. Our investigative team was also involved. So, but a bigger part of Rappler has to do with other things like, another big part of Rappler has to do with multimedia, exploring the use of multimedia in reporting and using mobile for making sure for communicating the news quickly. So there was quite a lot of experimentation as we started. We even put together our own mobile van using basically building on what we know of the technology, and then translating as much as possible a lot of the things that are usually hardware and expensive into exploring the use of software instead of hardware, which can be very expensive. And during the early days, our reporters were among the first to really in the country who were really reporting straight from their mobile phones, and that one of the photos here shows that. The other thing that we were really playing around with and play Rappler's really Rappler is really our HR chief actually says this. Rappler is sort of a playground where we experiment a lot with things like that the online space allows us to do, and one of that is data. So data journalism became part of the other things that we used as tools for enhancing our reporting. So in relation to, for instance, election data back in the past several elections that where Rappler is already there, and then in exposing or sometimes adding nuance to claims around the usual cheating patterns in during elections. So things that involve looking at big chunks of data in order to make sense of what's happening on the ground during critical issues such as elections. So those are some of the things that we've really worked on over the past years. But apart from that, the third pillar of Rappler, as I mentioned, is community, and we have a team called Move PH, which is really engaging with civil society groups and other communities on the ground, even government, in relation to key issues. So an example here would be the fact that the Philippines is one of the top, most disaster-prone countries, or in the most highly populated, disaster-prone countries in the world. And because of that, there's really a need for preparedness. So we saw that aside from reporting the way journalists typically do about disasters, there's also a need for media really to be part of solution seeking, and this is what the civic engagement team does. So there was a point when we actually had to train government bodies like the VVOX, for instance, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, and how they can more effectively use social media in relation to communicating issues or scientific knowledge about disasters. We've also been looking at how to use social media to harness citizen action around when disasters actually strike. So quite a lot of work on the part of the civic engagement team over the past years had to do with really working with different citizens whenever there's a typhoon, whenever there's flooding, and so on. So, and a big part of that also uses data and technologies, developing technologies. Towards the 2016 elections, though, what we started noticing online was that the rise in hate and the rise in disinformation, and this has prompted us to shift the efforts and put a lot of effort into studying further this space, because of this. What we saw was an increase in hate, bullying, cyberbullying online, and at the same time an increase in the amount of disinformation that is being circulated in the space. So we started looking at capturing data on the online spaces within the Philippines and analyzing who's working with who is behind particular messaging, and as well as who is distributing misinformation or disinformation. So and those and sometime in 2016 we established formally our fact check project. So before this, in the past, fact checking was more of like something that we do on the fly, not really something that you pursue as a regular part of report. I mean, as not really something that you do as a separate project, but more as part of regular reporting. But what happened was that because of what we saw as a need, when we saw that there's been an increase in the number of these groups that are involved in disinformation or misinformation or false claims, or posting false claims, we started regularizing our fact check project and became a signatory of the IFCN and later one of Facebook's third-party fact check partners. So part of the effort is we use the data that we collect from social media and the fact-checking project to study the disinformation network. So we've been doing reports. This is a series of our early reports about the propaganda war online and how fake accounts are being used to manufacture reality. Now, the investigations, we've done quite a lot of these investigations in the digital space. A number of those have led to takedowns. So this is one example of a takedown, the most recent takedown that resulted from an investigation we conducted into information operations online, had to do with attacks against individual activists and activist organizations, and these attacks include outright false claims and hateful messaging, and some of which are shown here. And when we started looking at that network, we found that they were being amplified by police pages as well as by pages whose administrators are unknown. And so what we did was we looked at the network, and then as we asked Facebook for its policies, and we shared with them the data, and they conducted their own investigation, and that resulted in a takedown. So during their investigation, they found that this network was actually operated by a group of military personnel. So this is just an example of a number of these investigations that we have done so far. We've been looking at networks on the ground that are actually actively posting content that are practically revising history in the Philippines, like even to the point of showing fantastic claims, and people believe them. So this is one of the things that Rappler has been working on, really, like doing the fact-checking and the disinformation network, reporting on the disinformation networks. But aside from this, we saw the need also to use our multimedia experience to produce content on fact-checking online. We have our own series of fact-check video that's done in Filipino and in Taglish. It's a mix of Filipino and English so that we can reach a broader mass. What else do we do to fight this information? We've been conducting webinars. So in the past, we used to do these workshops to teach the fact-check methodology. Now what we've been doing is we've shifted online because of the pandemic, and then we've conducted over 4 dozen of these webinars where you have like roughly like several hundred people attending, and they're all learning the fact-check methodology. And then these webinars, then participants of these webinars, what we've seen so far is that they've seen the need to like replicate those webinars in their own communities. So some of the ongoing trainings have to do with we're currently preparing for the May 2022 election. So some of the trainings we've been doing recently has to do involves election watchdogs, and we're teaching them how to spot this information related to elections. So Rappler's gone through a huge crisis back in 2018 when the Philippines Securities and Exchange Commission issued a ruling. Basically revoking our license, and that has around that time as well, we have gone through. That was also the height of our of attacks against us. There were the attacks started sometime in 2016, but it really heightened towards 2018. Obviously, to justify that ruling that our license should be revoked. And there's quite a lot. I'm sure a number of you are probably familiar with this. There are quite a lot of cases right now filed against our CEO, Maria Ressa, as well as the company itself. And we're still battling this. But one of the things that we realized as we were battling these concerns, as we were going through this crisis, was the work that we have done with communities actually helped. So a big part of the survival of Rappler, and well, we're still struggling to survive, but a big part of the reason why Rappler, I think, survived over the past years is because it has engaged with communities. And I guess this is the biggest lesson that can be seen from our story. Because of our engagement with communities on the ground, not just online, we sort of developed a support system that worked with us and fought for us and helped us survive the attacks. And right now we're in a number of them are already part of a group that is also helping Rappler survive financially. So one of the things that we have seen over the past, we launched over the past years, and that's growing, is Rappler Plus, which is our a way for communities to support Rappler, support independent journalism, and it's still something we're growing, because really one challenge for news organizations and independent media at large is how do you survive in this space, and somehow what Rappler has been doing is looking at its three pillars in order and looking to maximize the three pillars in order to find that model that will help independent journalism not just survive but thrive in a space, in the current digital space, which is really hard and challenging for news organizations and journalism. So yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
Let me try to summarize what Gemma has told us. Of course, we already know Rappler and what this organization is trying to do. There are three major pillars of Rappler: journalism, technology and data, and community. And I like what Gemma said about the playground. They think that this organization is a playground for the workers to have experiment on, surrounding the three major values and pillars. So, and in addition to investigation and fight against disinformation, they also take efforts on education and training courses. So it's kind of to empower, including the government, the NGO, and also the whole civil society. So we are very excited to hear what you say more in the next section. Well, then let's welcome our third speaker. It's Benja from Mongolia. Hi, Benja, welcome.
Hello, I'm Benja, and I'm from Mongolia, and I represent Faro Foundation Mongolia, which is safety partner of Facebook. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Taiwan Fact-Checking Center, to organize such wonderful event and a Forum of Asian Fact-Checking in 2021. especially now that we live in a very rapid world and misinformation is one of the leading causes. It would be awesome, and I'm so honored to be part of such event and listen from the industry experts and listen from and share idea with the other people who also work in the same field. And it's such an honor for me to be part of it. So thank you for organizing such a wonderful event. And at Faro Foundation, we have been working with digital literacy since 2017. And we mostly work with youth and educators and parents. So while we deliver these kind of digital literacy training, we call it Week in Digital here, there is one subject is also very important, is misinformation. So we live around misinformation. Globally, everybody, every country is facing this kind of situation and tackling misinformation. So to understand this kind of problem exists, we have to have a education for youth to understand misinformation can exist and misinformation can be harmful. And to tackle with these kind of issues, any government, public society, NGOs, civil society, private companies, all join together to tackle these issues. Therefore, there is a lot of fact-checking centers around the world, and fortunately, Mongolia has one called Mongolian Fact-Checking Center, who is recently approved by International Fact-Checking Network. So MFCC, Mongolian Fact-Checking Center, also work with us very closely to deal so many issues, especially now that we are living in a pandemic. There are a lot of misinformation about COVID. So misinformation related to vaccines, misinformation related to treatment of COVID, and all that can be very harmful. And therefore, fact checkers around the world joined hands together in trying to tackle these issues and make visible for everybody that such problem exists. And especially as a part of the person who work in the education industry, I personally like to invest myself and invest my team to deliver such training to everybody as possible and work with a lot of stakeholders, such as Ministry of Education. So we were working together, joining hands to make digital and media literacy as a part of national curriculum. So as many students as possible to have this kind of information, this kind of knowledge that they can navigate in the future, especially in digital environment. And then misinformation is one of the biggest problems everybody is facing. And then with media literacy and in a certain skills that can navigate and certain skills that identify its misinformation, people can actually get the good knowledge and maybe stay safe online. So this is very necessary for our country and region and the globally. And then fact-checking, Mongolian Fact-Checking Center is doing wonderful job in Mongolia. They have been doing a lot of political fact-check, a lot of new fact-checks on the news. And what we are more thankful for MFCC is that they do a lot of COVID-related fact-checking and put it in their social media, put it in their website, which everybody can access to. And then also MFCC and Faro Foundation joined together to deliver social media campaigns and then do the online training for everybody to be aware of these kind of misinformation exists. And then now that in the forum in Asia, everybody is joining hands together as a fact checkers to tackle common problem we have. And it's an amazing opportunity to listen from experts, listen from the people who are actually working in the industry. It's such an honor, and then I'm very grateful for everybody who are organizing it, everybody who's participating in it, and this is awesome that we have the dialogue going on, awesome that we have a conversation about this subject and fact-checking, so it will be such an amazing opportunity to listen from all of you, and then also share the experience in Mongolia to you guys. It's such an honor. And lastly, I would like to share some what's happening in Mongolia as well, as a region. So before Mongolian Fact-Checking Center, there was a lot of news about politics, COVID, or maybe attack anybody, celebrities or public figures. It had been very dangerous, and a lot of people used to believe that, and they will take a very bad form. Bad actors will do and whatever they need to do in whatever million ways they can do. So real world harm can be caused by all bad actors. And then now that we have a MFCC and we have NGOs and governments are fully aware of that, so we have a nationwide campaign working with all these private industries to deliver digital literacy knowledge to everybody. So we think digital is one of the very important programs right now that's happening in Mongolia. We just launched it in this year jointly with Facebook, and we covered almost 20,000 students over the years, and we deliver our trainings online. And then now that the Minister of Education joined hand with us, so we started also launching 1,000 teacher training program. And then from that, we also work with like Ministry of, we also work with the US Embassy here to deliver training for the students. And we also work with UN to deliver, UNICEF, UN to deliver more training to more rural areas. So I also take this opportunity to thank everybody, all the stakeholders who were involved in this project. As a nation, we understand the severity of these kind of issues. And then as a private company like Facebook, coming to Mongolia and making everybody understand that there is such thing called digital literacy, and misinformation is one of the problems we have to face. So to all this who's involved in the process, I would also like to thank you. And then I think Mongolia is on a great track. We are only 3 million people here, and only 2.2 million people has the access to internet. So they get all the information from the Facebook and social media. So it's very important that they also have aware that misinformation exists, and there are people who are working to fight for it. And then now that COVID situation exceeded the spread of misinformation, but there is a lot of like good-hearted people who's trying to fight these kind of situation. And I would also like to thank you, everybody who's taken part of fact checking, and good luck.
Thank you, Binja, for bringing us the stories and your efforts from Mongolia. Faro, your organization, from we have heard, started digital literacy in year 2017, and the efforts is to fight against disinformation, and the approach you use is to cooperate with different sectors in your country, such as the government, the schools, the private organizations. And another point I get from Binja is it demands cross-sector cooperation to do better our job. So it includes cooperation within certain countries and regions or the whole global society. So right now we have heard the 3 presentations from our honored speakers. And from our screen, our audience, you can see all 3 speakers. They are all online with us. And we got a bunch of questions. I think the main issue and concern here is regarding the relationship of fact-check organizations and the government and the whole society, how to maintain independence in the whole picture of cooperating with the government or fight against the government, this kind of thing. And we also have some special questions for Professor Masato, especially because you are based in Hong Kong, and we all know about the changing political environment in Hong Kong. So from our chatting room, there are some questions asking about how to do fact-checking test in Hong Kong and how is the situation there. And I am not sure if I get all the questions here, but maybe we can have the first round of answers from all of our speakers about the independence of fact-checking or media literacy organizations. And Summer is also here. So Summer, do you want to add more points before we start our QA section? Summer?
I think all the speakers can read all the questions. So some of the question is for Professor Masato. So would Professor Masato will be the first speaker to answer the questions? And I think some of the audience are asking about how did you give the advice to fact-checking organizations to keep balance between the government and the independence of fact-checking organization?
Okay, so who want to start talking or answering the questions? So can I ask Professor Masato to
sure.
speak first?
Can you guys
Thank
hear me
you.
okay? Yeah. Well, there were many questions concerning the relationship with the government. I would say, well, fact-checking, it's much easier to tell or show the audience or demonstrate to the audience that you are not partisan, because you can actually show it in your stories. If your fact-checking stories are only investigating one side of the political spectrum, obviously that's a problem. But if you can show, hey, just check out our website, we have like 25 stories from the last 2 weeks. 10 of them are actually fact-checking government officials and questionable statistics that they've used in their statement. So if you have that kind of stories that you can show to the audience, I don't think you should be concerned too much about how you would look like to the audience. I mean, as long as your product, your end journalistic stories prove that you're neutral, I don't think you should be worried too much. There was a question about the Education Bureau hiring you to develop fact-checking courses and media literacy courses for primary schools and secondary school students. If you're from Hong Kong, I would say that's much trickier than fact-checking. One good thing about fact-checking journalism is different from investigative journalism. In fact-checking, we are actually checking the information public already has. Internet rumors, statistics that government's using, or statements from the public officials, whatever the information you're fact-checking, you are doing it after the fact. Information's already in the hands of the public. So when you try to verify certain information, people have already heard about it. That's very different from investigative journalism, where you actually dig something that people don't know yet. And that's much more tricky in Hong Kong right now. And that's why I think one of the participants mentioned Bao Choi. She was arrested for her investigative work, and her methodology was perfectly legal until like 2019. And suddenly that kind of basic journalistic skills that we are teaching to our students as well has been now deemed illegal. And that's a very difficult situation. So coming back to educational modules, my experience with the Education Bureau here as well is that as long as you can keep your editorial independence. So yes, you have to have an agreement with the government saying that, okay, I'm going to provide this service and you are just one of my clients. I'm not specifically doing this with the government. I will do this whoever asks me to do, and here's the contract, you sign it. And on that contract, you should specifically say, we have 100% control over the teaching material that we produce, right? So therefore, government has no say. And that's a really difficult deal at the moment to strike in Hong Kong. I think Education Bureau, or anybody who's from the government side, they want to check and make sure that you are not saying the kind of things that you are not supposed to be saying in schools. So that's much more difficult. Whereas in fact-checking, it's much more straightforward. Information is already public, and you can actually show through your work how you are not, I mean, how you're independent. And that, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. So Gemma,
Yeah,
can you also show
we're kind
show
of
your perspective
yeah.
on this
We're-
issue?
Yes, we're actually, we've experienced being in two sides of that equation. But first of all, I want to also agree with what Professor Masato pointed out. What's very important here is if you do engage with government or with any other parties for that matter, what's very critical is any contracts include that clause of editorial independence. In fact, when we put up Rappler, part of the agreement with investors is precisely that also, editorial independence. It's the journalists who control the newsrooms, everything, like decision making around stories need to be in the hands of journalists. That's tricky, not just for a government operated media, but also for any media that is like, that has owners. Because typically owners would want to have a say in what is being said or whatever. So, and that's a balance. That's really something that we made sure was part of the investment requirements from the get-go. Now, we've been in a situation where our civic engagement team, the one that engages with different communities, have worked with government in relation to disasters and other crisis situations. And for that, it's really, for instance, one key engagement was around verification of like posts online that are in relation to needs on the ground in relation to disasters. And that was again, for all of those, for that kind of engagement, the requirement, the engagement protocols included that clause, the editorial independence clause. But right now, the tricky part really is because we've been doing investigative work, and sometimes one thing that is very, very important to note is people will never distinguish your investigative work versus your fact-checking work. They'll see you as one. That can be a challenge for fact checkers. So therefore, because we've been doing investigations around the drug war, for instance, and corruption in governments, and you have an administration right now which is really really was able to harness a lot of support, and it's a very popular administration. Only recently has some support been eroded, but that means that you do have to face the possibility of being really branded as biased, because there's a tendency for that kind of following to be like fanatical, and therefore anything that is criticism and anything that is deemed as critical of the leadership is then deemed as in fact we're regarded as fake. They comment that it's fake news. So those will come. I mean, it's part of the challenge of fact checking, and I think it's a part of a challenge of fact checking in a region like this, where unfortunately democratic values are not always like something that's universally accepted, and there are challenges to democratic values as well. So yeah, we all face it.
Okay. Well, we got two more questions for Gemma from our chatting room. Congratulations on the Nobel Peace Prize. So how does the government or the politicians respond to it?
Okay, first when
Well,
when we heard the announcements, the funny thing is I was in a webinar on fact checking at the time that at the time that the announcement came out, and I was speaking, and then suddenly there were comments coming in through the chat. Or through the comment section on Zoom, and people were saying, "Hey, congratulations!" So I had to double check like what's happening in our other internal chat rooms. But so the funny thing there is that you're sort of in a position. The reason why Maria was named precisely as was awarded the prize is precisely because of the challenges to journalism in the Philippines, and I guess Rappler and Maria, for that matter, became symbolic of that. And so it was very, I mean, understandably, the reaction of government and the agencies, like government officials, like it took them a while to actually react. Like, for instance, Malacanang took about like a weekend to react, and then at the same time, the allies in the Senate. There's a prize that is given at the Senate for Filipinos who are accorded honor in other countries or global honors, and there's a, I mean, after the award, what happened was that they had a debate at the Senate about whether that's an automatic thing or do they have to discuss it. So well, regardless, I mean, it doesn't really matter. But that's kind of the reaction, because precisely the award was sort of a recognition of the challenges, and the challenges came from to a significant degree from the administration. So there. And on the second question about how we are preparing for the presidential election, so the past, as I mentioned in the presentation, the past couple of years following when the pandemic struck, a big part of the efforts were really around promoting the fact check methodology, precisely because we knew that this will be used again. Moving into the elections, we were expecting this fire hose of falsehoods coming in, and in fact, that's already we've been seeing it's been relentless over the past years, but it really ramped up again recently. So we've been preparing for that by really training people to spot things that should be fact checked. And how training them on how to report, and part of it is like making sure that there will be people within the different areas. So it's not just in Metro Manila, the capital region, but also in the provinces, that there will be volunteers in those areas who can help us out with that, and then can help us with fact checking.
Okay, thank you, Gemma, for your answers. And Binja, are you here with us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, because we know that different fact check organization or literacy organizations in each country, they have different relationship with the government and their societies. And it seems to me that Faro has a good relationship with the government, especially for your tasks on, to promote digital literacy. So how do you, view this kind of relationship? What's the benefit and what's the challenge, or maybe some, some risk in this kind of cooperation?
Okay, that's a great question. So at Faro Foundation, we mostly focus on education. And Mongolian Fact Checking Center, they are dedicated fact checkers doing all sorts of fact checking through their channels. So we actually work very closely, but as you know, as previously mentioned with Professor Masato and Gemma, it's sometimes it can be tricky when it comes to government relationships, especially when you fact check government. So we had this incident. So the Ministry of Health, when they put information of COVID, especially like during this period, the MFCC, they did fact checking on their content. And then, of course, Ministry of, and then they're labeled as a, there is false, true, and then it's difficult to, the one is that in between, saying like it's not false, it's not true. I'm sorry, I think it's the language where I can't tell the exact word of it. So the Ministry of Health wasn't happy. Of course, the fact checkers check the content in social media and say that the content that was inside was confusing. I mean, it's not the right and it's not the wrong. It's not the true or false. So it was in between. And then from there, the relationship with government and fact checking kind of pick up. And then also because of that incident, Mongolian public kind of aware of there is this fact checking center exists, and then they do all sorts of fact checkings. And then we had the election this year, and then before the election, also some parties approached fact-checking networks to do fact-checkings, and then it was also a bit for our team, a bit challenging for our team, to be unbiased, not to relate to parties. So we followed the journalism integrity. We didn't serve any parties. We just did exactly what we were supposed to do. At the same time, to mass education is very important. It's the long-term solutions to people to be aware of, people to know or learn basic fact check themselves in terms of misinformation, at least check the resources of the contents that have been published in social media. So to do that, so we kind of have to do like nationwide social media campaign on digital literacy, which contains a sector called misinformation. So the digital literacy covers have to be safe online, have to protect your privacy, and have to identify misinformation and critical thinking. So in that specific part, we work with MFCC and we work with Ministry of Education. So we try to, as an NGO, as an bridge of these different stakeholders, because we sometimes involve UNICEF, we sometimes involve UN, sometimes we involve private industries like telecoms or bankings, because they are the one who also work with in digital transformation. So, and then we bring some of the ministries and fact checking together to deliver these kind of joint message saying, hey, we need to really need to get the message across. We really need to be very careful in terms of information we're receiving, and we shouldn't believe everything we see on social media. So, of course, there is going to be a lot of challenges to managing this kind of relationship between fact checkers, journalists, then the government, and then the private sectors and the civil societies. Everybody. So the challenge is, of course, we want something, end result is something same. We want the same result, but it's more like a human-to-human relationship when it comes to like joint collaboration. So the challenges in the building relationship and building trust between these factors, and then the benefit is, of course, once we join hands together, we tackle the issues together. So of course, the result is much more satisfactory compared to one independent organization is trying to put their message across, trying to do that. It's going to be a lot of resources, and then the capacity building is very impossible for one organization. So obviously, bringing different stakeholders and touch their group basis is much more efficient. But building this trust, especially between the government stakeholders and then fact checkers and civil societies, sometimes tends to not align well. So that's when we see our role as a bridge between these organizations have the dialogue going, to have the communications among these. And then because as an independent NGO, and because we are safety partner of Facebook as an international company in Mongolia, because Mongolia, we don't have any big international companies working in Mongolia. So what makes us, what makes public trust us is that because we don't serve parties, or we are one part of one big private company, nor we are part of any government, but more like a foreign company, foreign big tech company's safety partner, it makes us much more trustable into the public eyes. So if we, right now the ruling party in Mongolia is MPP, and if we work a bit closely in MPP, it's going to be very hard for us to earn public's trust, and and especially for MFCC as well, now that we always do things together. And then from the other end, to us to have a maintained image of independently and unbiased is also very important to the public. So we do this kind of training. We try to be as much as transparent as possible. So those are the challenges we have, and those are the benefits we have. And so previously mentioned that's how we manage this kind of relationship. So I hope I answered the questions you've asked.
Okay, thank you. I think our speakers, the answers they just provided, there are common points they try to tell us. First is to maintain financial and editorial independence. It's very important for all fact-check organizations in each countries and in each region. And the second thing is to engage in the public, to enter into the ecosystem and in the process of dialogue. And of course, the government, especially, they are the role to be monitored by our organizations, and also the mainstream media. They are not very happy when their stories are checked. Yeah, but I think it's an ongoing dialogue among these different sectors. And the next section, I will bring 2 questions from our audience to all our 3 speakers. The first question is regarding the social media platforms. And the questions from our chatting room is that, as we all know, many social media has their own fact-checking system. And under their protocols, information has been censored and blocked. What are your views on the online operation of fact-checking platforms and media under the dominance of social media? So that's first questions for all of you. And the second question is that, how do these fact-checking organizations do to extend your scopes and influences in your countries? So yeah, I think that these 2 questions are all for all 3 speakers in our meeting room. So Professor Masato, are you still here with us?
Yes,
Do you want
I am.
to speak first?
Okay. I think about the first question, I think we should separate fact-checking from content moderation. I think this particular question seems to be asking about content moderation, where Facebook, YouTube, they have their own community standards and guidelines. So for example, child pornography, certain nudities, extreme violences, those are censored by the platforms. But fact-checking is different. I mean, in case of Facebook, for example, they do hire third-party fact-checkers like, Rappler, where Gemma works for, or Taiwan Fact Check Center, Michael Penn, they are all third-party fact-checkers working with Facebook, not for Facebook. So I think that's a fair way to do fact-checking. It's much better than platform deciding what's true, what's not. I think content moderation is another matter, because content moderation doesn't really involve deciding whether or not certain information is facts or not, right? I mean, nudity has nothing to do with facts or not non-facts. Yeah, it's just the content that is not allowed to be circulating on that particular platform. So we have to differentiate the two. Extreme violence, for example, can be facts. This video is real, but still, should it be shared or not? That's what platforms can decide. So I think that's a bit different. Impact, so this one, I don't think, well, it really, when people talk about impact, what we often forget is the actual goals of your activity in the first place, right? Impact has to be measured against the initial goals you have or you had. So if you are thinking that fact-checking can make the public better informed, they will make political decisions based on accurate information, I think you're dreaming. I don't think fact-checking has that impact, unfortunately. And this is not just me saying this. If you look at least in Hong Kong, we have looked at all the public opinion polls from 3 or 4 different organizations since 2014 and see how misinformation actually affects the people's political tendency and inclinations. And what we see is that it doesn't matter if there's lots of fake news or no fake news. It doesn't matter if there are lots of fact-checking or not. People don't really change their voting behaviors, their political attitudes based on that. They do have influence. They have been influenced by other factors. So if you look at Hong Kong, it's always 60 to 70% more autonomy to Hong Kong, 30 to 40% more integration to China. And that hasn't changed. And so again, we are comparing before and after social media, before and after the circulation of massive misinformation, before and after the fact-checking. Because in Hong Kong, we didn't have dedicated fact-checking organizations in 2014. We only had one, right? There are several projects based for the protests, umbrella movement at the time, but we only had one fact-checking organizations in 2014. Now we have 7. In 2019, we actually had 9 dedicated fact-checking organizations working in Hong Kong. And that didn't really make much difference. So if your goal is to, let the public have accurate information right away, and I don't think you don't see that much impact. But on the other hand, I think the impact of misinformation has been exaggerated as well, because again, we don't really see that. I think what Gemma and also the Mongolian colleagues are doing is much more impactful in the future, education, because coordinated propaganda effort is really easy to detect. If you are in disinformation research, you learn the tools and techniques very quickly. You know how certain bad actors are coordinating to attack certain political candidates, for example, how they are creating 20 different media accounts simultaneously and trying to coordinate with one another. That's easier to see. Much more difficult is to detect organic spread of certain information, right? And if you want to stop the organic spread, you really have to start with each and every news audience. And I think that's where education comes in. And that's the reason why I think with the fact-checking tools and techniques, I mean, of course, fact-checking is very important. The public should have an accurate information, even if that's not the deciding factor in a political area. But I think it's more importantly, that kind of tools and techniques must be transferred to the next generation of news audience who can actually do fact-checking on their own. So I see a strong value and probably long-term positive impact of fact-checking through education. So it's a bit like professional sports. Fact-checkers are like professional basketball players. You show the public how things should be done. But what actually changes the country is that everybody then plays that sport. Like in Taiwan, for example, baseball is very popular. It's not just because the professional baseball leagues, because there are so many kids who also play baseball, right? And I think fact-checking should be like that. Professional fact-checkers, they're brilliant, right? Their investigative skills are very good, but at the same time, in every school, every kids learn bits and pieces of fact-checking. So I think that's much more impactful, and that's how you extend your influence, in my view.
Sorry, Masato-san. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, this is Paul from Termicro. Why asking this question? Because actually, almost 1 year ago, we tried to run their kinds of fact-checking service in Japan. But we facing a lot of problem. I would say the problem is because of some the culture issues. Because we talked to lots of Japanese colleagues and also the friends. They tell me that in Japan they know the lots of the disinformation there, but most of the people they don't really like to use the fact checking service to find the real thing. So I'm just wondering if you have any suggestion, then how can we run in this kind of service in Japan? Actually we running the same thing in Philippines. So, but in Philippines, it's a different situation because most of the topic is about the political, about the President Duterte. So, it's very difficult to tell the user, okay, this information from your president, we got problem. If you say that, we got problem. So, I would like to know, sir, if we want to run this kind of service in Japan, any kind of suggestion you think?
Okay. I can be very quick. Well, there are lots of fact-checking organizations in Japan. You can visit FIJ's website. It's called Fact Check Initiative Japan. It's sort of like an industry organization that has many fact-checking groups.
Yeah, actually, we have conversation and talk with the FIJ, and we also want to integrate with the FIJ service. Actually, the thing is, when we try to use our chatbot service to extend our service and let more user to understand and to use this kind of service, when they get some misinformation, they can check, right? But I think the problem is we sound very, I would say, the culture issue, like the people, they're scared to know they don't want to check, they think everything is real. But actually, when we talk with the FIJ, they say no, actually it's still lots of misinformation in Japan. So we just want to figure out how can we, if we want to contribute something, how can we do that?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you are asking. I don't see any culture interfering there. Like I said, national newspapers like Mainichi and Asahi have fact-checking units now. 2 local newspapers in Okinawa, they have been very active. There are 1 or 2 dedicated fact-checking organizations, one in Osaka, one in Tokyo. I mean, BuzzFeed Japan does lots of fact-checking stories. But having said that, the impact of misinformation and disinformation in general in Japan is minuscule compared with other Asian countries. It almost has no impact in politics at all. It has some negative, well, I mean, misinformation is always topic-based. Each country has different topic that people get really emotional. And in Japan, that's the ethnic minorities from Korea living in Japan. So I think maybe my suggestion would be you focus on 1 or 2 very touchy, sensitive topics in Japan, and you can offer your service there, because those are the kind of topics that some other fact-checkers might be hesitant, like you said, fact-checking royal family, for example. that's really socially, culturally taboo. I don't know if there's anything to fact check there, but there are certain topics that, yes, you're right, people tend to avoid. So if you are willing to get into that, and if you see any value in that, maybe, I'm not quite sure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we got a bunch of questions and active audience. That's very good. And let me see. How about
Gemma's
we
raising
have
her hand.
Gemma to answer the questions, and
I was
and then we will open the floor to the audience to actively engage in the dialogue. And please also make sure that you raise your hands and speak, okay? So Gemma, please.
Yeah, there were just some points earlier that I thought I'd jump in on. So first, there was a question earlier about moderation, and to what extent do you do moderate? And of course, the platforms do their own moderation in a way that's gatekeeping, which we as journalists and newsrooms actually do when we select who to interview, right? So there's gatekeeping powers there as well. It's just that in this case, because you have platforms already and everybody can post on platforms, therefore there's this pressure on the platforms to do that gatekeeping role, or to do that moderation to a certain degree, because in the same way that as news organizations, when you're reporting and there's sensitive material, you're supposed to actually annotate it, provide context, or just plain say that this is not true, right? So those are things, part of that is really because you're now speaking of a space, you're not talking of a situation where the gatekeeping, like in the past, the information goes through gatekeepers, goes through verifiers. That's not the case anymore, because everybody who is online can actually post their own content. So that's the distinguishing part, which makes the role of the platforms very important. And I think this connects to the question about impact. While fact-checking is important, and it's really great to teach people how to fact-check, I do agree that the impact is very limited if you're talking externally, like if you are fact-checking and not collaborating with platforms, or not working with the platforms to begin with. Because your problem there is you're talking about the pipelines. Where is information shared? What is like the broadcast capabilities of the platform, and that broadcast capability is the algorithm. So it's algorithmic. What we're talking about here is the important thing that we need to address here is algorithmic amplification. What is getting amplified by the platforms? Is it true information? Is it verified information? Or is it unverified or even false information? And we have quite a lot of documentation around false information getting amplified. And that's the part where that's really the reason why when we do our project, we're not just doing the fact checks, we also investigate, and we also look at the data on the impact of the impact of the information, the disinformation, and who is getting affected by it, who is perpetrating it. That's part of that is a part of the whole process, we think. And the big part of it is really around harm, the concept of harm. So for COVID-19, the concept of harm is around health, around misinformation or disinformation that result in people believing in false cures, and therefore, or false cures, or even vaccine misinformation, which is in effect affecting how people respond to important public health issues, right? So I mean, that's really where we're at. So and I think this is in effect what this means is really fact checkers will really need to engage with the pipes, the digital pipelines of information now. It's not something that that can be divorced. People don't look for fact checks. That's something we found. In fact, when we talk about when we publish our fact checks, what we try to target is like how will people look for this kind of information, and how then should you package this kind of information so that when people search for that, what they'll find is the fact check and not the disinformation or not the misinformation. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but it's really about thinking about how people consume information online and how then can fact checks become part of that or like nuance that. And then at the same time, I'm really agree that part of it, I think the value of fact checking is about promoting critical thinking. And that's the reason why we do these webinars. I'm hoping that even now, like at the very least, that means that we're breeding people. I mean, we're breeding a generation that will learn to nuance what they see online and therefore understand, distinguish what is wrong and not, what is false and what is not, what is true.
Okay, thank you, Gemma. Yeah, I think the point I got from Gemma is that the true information, especially regarding public affairs, is very important to the public. And what the fact-check organizations are doing is to provide sound information environment for the society. And of course, from our audience, we have further questions. When we provide this kind of information, how will we do to promote, and to more people to gather the right information, and how to make them feel interested? So I think it's very interesting questions. So maybe we can hear more from our speakers. So, and I think this skill is very important to engage the public, and that's what Binja is doing in Mongolia, right? So Binja, can you share us some of your tricks and skills to engage the public?
Okay, so it's like let's agree on this. So when we do fact checking and when we do put it published on the websites or in the chat, it's not necessarily sometimes reach the target we want to reach. So in terms of to public, what we do is we do kind of massive educational campaign, and then for example, in Mongolia, it's like the terminology fact checking is fairly new. We just kind of learning about like the digital literacy, then media and information literacy, then fact checking is fairly new. It's been like the conversation started like a year ago. So still there is a lot of people who is not aware of these kind of fact checking exist, and then information can be fact checked, especially in rural areas where we don't have a lot of access to internet. We don't have a lot of the capacities in the rural areas. So what we usually do is to do a lot of promotional campaign in terms of introducing fact check, and not the specific context that they fact checked, but like the information can be fact checked. If the information is already displaced, can be fact checked, and there are people who do that, and then you can get accurate information from there as well. And usually to reach a lot of public, we kind of leverage. Last year we did an series of series of panel discussion consists of, for example, 4 people. And the guest will be like fact checker, influencer, government worker, and maybe myself will be the host in the panel discussion from civil society. So we kind of leverage these networks of these people. For example, the fact checkers, they will have their own network, people who are interested in their fact checking, people who like to read it. For the influencers, their target audiences we are looking into who is not aware of that. And then for the government workers, who will give us more on policy side of information. And I will be doing the moderation. So we had this series of panel discussion. We put it online. And for example, because of the influencer, we had a lot of very good high rating of views. And then with that, we kind of giving the message across. So what we use it here is that like the context of fact checking is the secondary when it comes to the public awareness. So we try to put the dialogue going out there initially in that. But compared to other countries, like I said previously, it's fairly new technology. There are not many people that are working on it. And we only have like one fact-checking center. And another one is still, it's not approved by IFC. And so it's 2. And then they're not really aggressive on the fact-checking. So because of the human resources. So right now, mostly we work onto public awareness and then let people know there's this kind of work we're doing. And that kind of campaign requires, we usually do influencers in terms of like putting the words out there.
Okay, thank you, Binja. Well, thank you all for being here with us to talk about the important issues and provide the insights on fact-checking, digital literacy, and democracy sustainability. Actually, in our audience, we got a bunch from academic field and also the fact-checking organizations. And there are a lot of practitioners in the audience. So we have about 10 minutes left. So is there anyone to speak with our, our guest speakers and or have further questions or provide your insights on today's forum? Anyone want to speak? You are very welcome to raise your hand and join our discussion. Paul, yeah, I see Paul is raising his hand.
Sorry, it's me
Please,
again.
yes.
Actually, in the past 2 years, we try to extend our service to U.S., Philippines, Japan, also in Taiwan as well. And we faced lots of challenges. That means we try to be in the middle, but that's very tough and very difficult because some of the people when they saw some result from fact checking, they were still thinking you belong with some certain party or government. So I think it's also the big challenge for the fact checking organization. So I'm just thinking, so is it possible that we can, I don't know, figure out the one thing to fix it, this kind of issues? And the other one is, I think in Taiwan it's very special because most of the Taiwan fact-checking organization, they like to work together. They think they can share the information to each other is fine. But when we try to go to like US or other country, especially in US, most of the fact-checking service or organization, they don't want to work together. The only thing is because I think they want to survive, so everything, if you want to talk to them, hey, I can help your service to let more people to see your content and article, they will say, okay, where's the money? Everything they were thinking about is a license free. They don't want, I don't know the reason, but because maybe they still need to survive. So I think so maybe in Asia it's a possible like we can cooperate together and we can share as I know that TFC is doing the same thing now. So they try to, collect their different data from different, fact-checking organizations. So I think maybe it's possible we can, all the Asia countries can work together. Then we can share some, the information and that, I don't know, maybe can fix some problem.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for your questions. So, Paul, do you want to introduce yourself? I believe you are a practitioner in this circle, the fact-checking circle. It's very practical questions what you have raised, and I believe that's the challenges you are facing. So we only have 5 or 6 minutes. So how about I will pass the time to our 3 speakers. Please help Paul with the 2 questions. The first question is that how to gain, public trust to, to accept the fact-checking results. And the second thing is that, of course, once on the one side, we want to maintain independence to get public trust. But on the other side, of course, it needs money and the resources to do our job better. So how to keep the balance? So please, our 3 speakers, please share your final insights on the 2 questions with 2 minutes for each. Is that okay? So, Professor Masato, are you here? Okay, great.
I always go first.
Okay, if you want to,
that's all right,
please
right.
the last. We can do that.
So there are lots of research in this field, right? And I think one thing we know that so changing people's opinions is very difficult. It's almost impossible. I think that's the reason why people get annoyed or irritated. If you say, hey, here's the facts, how can you support this government because they're always lying? That's a wrong approach, right? You say, why don't we agree that this is a bit of an exaggeration and misleading, and we agree on that. It's not factual. But having said that, you are free to support whoever you want. So there is a lot of research saying that you are much more open to correction if you are corrected by somebody from your circle. So in Taiwan's case, if you are, let's say, like Pan Blue, you support KMT, you don't want to be corrected by a hardcore Pan Green person, then you get irritated. But if you have a colleague who also supports your political party, he or she says, hey, that's actually fake news. I read this fact-checking story. They are more open-minded about that. So I think, peer correction is much better than others correcting them. So it's family members, the same thing. If you are politically on the same side, maybe it works better than if you're politically on different spectrum. Or there are some indications that parents never listen to their kids in Asia, but but they listen to grandkids. So instead of you try to correct your parents, you ask your son or daughter and say, hey, why don't you talk to grandma? She will really listen to you. I don't know, that might work or not. But in Vietnam, there's this project to teach the grandkids how to talk to their grandparents about facts. I don't know if it works or not, but there are certain things that you can experiment, I think. But I think ultimately, if your approach is to change somebody's mindset, I think you are targeting the wrong goal. I think your goal should be, okay, let's at least agree on facts, and then you can argue. And I think that's the approach you should take. Yeah, that's my 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Professor Masato. It's very good strategy, I think. Yeah. Okay, and Gemma, please.
Yeah, so actually that's the reason why we do the webinars. The webinars are all about really sharing tools for fact-checking. So we try to simplify the processes and explain the processes during the webinars, and they are participated in by students, by teachers, but also by different sectors. And part of that is because precisely they may not believe me, but if it's something that is replicated by somebody else and the methodology is replicable, then maybe they'll believe that person who is known to them. So one interesting thing, one interesting question that I always get in all the webinars we've done is, like, every webinar that question crops up is, how do I talk to my auntie, my uncle, my lolo, my grandfather, my grandmother, or my parents who are sharing these false claims? So kids are asking, and we always tell them, okay, it's always to, first of all, be respectful. Never, don't be aggressive when you do that. Be respectful, but also explain the process. And it's really about that. So it's really building that building that culture, because at the end of the day, a big part of it is people are not familiar with the medium. It's new. It's still fairly new. And many don't know that anybody can actually just invent things there. So it's gonna be a long process, and on establishing trust is built over time and through a track record. And what is critical is you make sure that you have all the things there, like the disclosures are actually one of the things that was part of the process when we signed up to to become a verified signatory of the fact-checking network. That is very important, because that's how you build that, or start building that rapport and that covenant with your audience, and then that's something you report on every year. So yeah, it's not easy.
Okay, thank you, Gemma. Building culture, I believe there is a long way to go. And I found the response from Dale Lin. Yes, Gemma, I have an uncle who sends incorrect news up to 8 times a day on WhatsApp.
Yeah, my nephews and nieces, they called out their lola, my mom, and now what she does is she sends me things, and before she forwards it, so she asks, like, okay, is this true or not? And then she stops forwarding because the grandkids are saying it, like, stop, Lola.
Okay, finally, Binja, what's your strategies to persuade the old generation to accept the fact-checking results? Binja, are you here with us? I'm not sure. I cannot hear Binja.
During the time we are waiting for Binja,
Yes.
may I just have the small conclusions, and after Binja come back. Oh, okay, Binja.
Yeah. But yeah, our audience, please don't leave until the end, because before we close our forum, we will have a photo together. Okay, thank you. And Binja, now it's your time.
Thank you. Sorry, I think there have been a lot of construction upstairs, so there's a lot of background noises in there. So thanks for your answers, your questions, and then I think I have another call to jump in, so I will just be very quickly. And as I previously mentioned, you know, we do have a lot of rooms to improve in terms of that direction, especially in Mongolia. I can say about the other countries, we do have a lot of lacks of. Sorry, there is this background noise. So we do have a lot of room to improve. We do have a lot of like advocacy work to encourage journalists to like become fact checkers. I can say about the other countries, but in Mongolia, I mean, we do have a lot of information circulating online and social media, and then we don't have a lot of like overall, we do have a lot of challenges in terms of seeing from the fact checking. But what we can do at the moment is to deliver knowledge and deliver this kind of campaign towards the public. So, again, I always say this. I've been saying this for the last 4 years. Education is the solution to the long run to this, and giving public awareness to this kind of problem is also long solution to this. And I think it's not only fact checkers' job to tackle these issues. It's all about other different stakeholders to be involved. And I know we are closing up, so I would just say like thank you guys for organizing this event, and it's such a nice and honor to be part of it, and also learn from a lot of Professor Kajimoto and then Gemma, and it was so inspiring, and get to know you all was so awesome. So thanks, guys.